Tonight we have Reverend Glenn McCraney, retired Navy chaplain, to deliver our invocation and also to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. As everyone would please stand.
And let us pray. Eternal Father, strong to save, whose arm has bound the restless waves and steels the quaking heart of us all, hear us when we pray unto you tonight as we gather in this public forum. Our world is restless, and we are confused by an uncertain future. In this turmoil of uncertainty, we seek and request your abiding presence and divine strength in our meeting tonight and in our personal lives. And also we pray for our friends and neighbors at this time of stress, for those who are suffering and who have suffered through the past devastation of a hurricane. And grant unto our commissioners tonight the wisdom of Solomon, the bravery of Daniel, and the fortitude to make right decisions, coordinating among themselves as elected officials of Currituck County. As our elected people, give them courage and foresight tonight, we pray, and to be with us all. All of this we pray in your holy name. And all God's people say, Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For those of you who just come in, at 6 p.m. this evening, we had a work session to discuss beach driving in the 4x4 area of the Currituck Outer Banks. I'll move to item number 1, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? I would like to add as item 3, a presentation by the Centera Group. Any other changes?
3A. Is it 3A or is it?
Yeah, make it 3A. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 2, public comment. This is time to hear comments from the public on items of interest. I would ask you to limit your time to 3 minutes. And Mr. McCree will be our timekeeper. We have signed up Josh Bass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Josh Bass. I'm president of the Currituck Chamber of Commerce. I'm here tonight to thank Commissioners Martin and Commissioners Etheridge for attending the conference earlier this week, the Taking Care of Business conference that the North Carolina Congressional Delegation hosts every year. Thank you for coming with us. It was a great conference. We accomplished quite a bit. We were able to talk to leaders in the aviation industry that were there, which will be a great asset as we are working with COA on that aviation campus in Maple. Commissioner Etheridge also was able to ask a question of Admiral Roughhead, the number 1 person in the Navy on Joint Chiefs of Staff, about the OLF, and we got some answers about that. Not answers that we loved, but answers nonetheless, so it's always good to engage those leaders. We also were able to meet with Congressman Walter Jones and Congressman Randy Forbes. Both of those congressmen had previously given us commitments to work with us against the OLF, but we certainly were able to resecure those commitments as well. And we do appreciate members of the Board of Commissioners coming along and helping us in those efforts to support us here in Currituck County. Also, Friday of last week, the Chamber had its annual meeting and awards. And the Currituck County Commissioners won one of our President's Awards. And what we said at the time was that the Commissioners, as a board, you have supported us at the Chamber, always coming to events, always being available for advice and support, and always coming out to ask, how can we help the Chamber and the citizens of Currituck County and the citizens here in our business community? So we certainly appreciate that support. And if all of the Board of Commissioners would come down and accept the President's Award plaque, we would appreciate the entire board coming down, please.
Get a photo this week.
Yep, I can get a photo.
Give it to Lance.
We'll put all the pretty ones over here.
Cheers.
Josh, you're doing the pretty ones.
Josh, on behalf of the board, I certainly appreciate this award, and we have a good board. We try to do just as you say. We're trying to build businesses in Currituck, and we think that's very important. And I commend my colleagues for the work that they do each and every day. I know they spend a lot of time doing it, so thank each and every one of you, and y'all are all mighty deserving of this.
We appreciate your youth and energy in it.
Next, we
Mr.
have...
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to have one quick word about what Josh said. Based on the answers that Admiral Roughhead gave me to my question, we better remain vigilant and continue our fight on the OLF. That's all I'll say.
Thank you. And I, too, I was going to save this for Commissioner's comment, but I, too, would like to thank Mr. Martin, Mr. Etheridge, Mr. Bass, and also our Economic Development Director, Peter Bishop, for their taking away from their families and attending this on behalf of the citizens of Currituck. So thank y'all. That being said, next we have public comment. Mrs. Barbara Snowden.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Barbara Blythe Snowden, and I live at 154 Courthouse Road. I'm currently serving as president of the Currituck County Historical Society. And I'm here tonight because at your last meeting, you voted to go ahead with the demolition order for the Currituck Rosenwald School. I understand your desire to clean up the corridor. I think we all do. But I have a problem with where you started. A couple years ago, you hired a historical architectural survey to review all the homes in Currituck County. She looked at over 300 that were over 50 years old. She presented in her report to the commissioners a list of 10 properties that were of the most historical value and to be saved. And the number one on that list was the Rosenwald School. Her survey is in the planning department. It is also in the tax department. So it was quite a shock when I read that y'all had voted to have that building demolished. Just for your information, and I always talk about history, I'm sorry about that, but the building was built in 1919 after the local black community raised $1,000 of their own money to build a school. The building cost $4,000 total. The funds are, the black community raised $1,000, the white community raised $200, public funds, which would be state funds, were $2,000, and the Rosenwald Fund gave $800. The whole total cost of the building was $4,000. Now, there is a movement nationally to preserve Rosenwald schools, and I'm hoping that we can join that movement. One more interesting fact is that the building was actually built before the Rosenwald standardized their plans, and so it may be possible that the Currituck, you notice I say possible, that the Currituck building was the prototype for the two-teacher schoolroom that Rosenwald then built all over the United States. Because it was built in 1919 and they did not standardize plans until 1920. The national movement, a completed Rosenwald school stood as a symbol of community values and achievement, the visible results of local initiative and preservation. Since we've known about the danger to this school, I've received emails from Rhode Island, South Carolina, Maryland, as well as people from Currituck and North Carolina. We would like to request that you rescind your order to give us some time to see what can be done. If nothing else, we'd like to stabilize this building in the fall. We've talked to the family and they said they did not object to our stabilization. We would like to see if we could get someone to take the property and possibly move it off the property. This would lessen its chance to be on the National Register, because once you move a property from its original site, it lessens the chances that it will be recognized on the National Register. This building is eligible. It's already on the study list for the state of North Carolina. And so it would be possible for National Register nomination. We've already had Russ Steele, who is a nationally known restoration carpenter who happens to live in this county, to look at the building, as well as somebody to move it. Reed Thomas, who is the restoration specialist for the eastern part of North Carolina for the Department of Archives and History, is willing to bring a team down and see what he can do at looking at the building and give us instructions on how to stabilize the building. If anybody who's listening to this meeting would like to help, all they need to do is contact the Historical Society at Box 134, Currituck, and we need all the help possibly. We're not asking for money, but time. Restoration takes time. As Mr. O'Neill knows from working with the Jarvisburg College School, and Mr. Etheridge knows from working with Wellhead, restoration takes time to fit all the pieces together. Again, we request that you rescind your demolition order and give us time to see what is possible. It may not be possible to save this building, but I would not like to think that we let it be destroyed without at least somebody trying. In cooperation in southern communities, two writers, Wolfer and Fisher, stated, and this is a quote, "Each Rosenwald school story opens a small window into the numerous local situations that signified the critical significance of the local community. Products of regional initiative that operated through state organizations to reach into the local community. Rosenwald schools stood in the past and stand today as a physical reminder that the local community is the place where permanent improvement must be made, and people who make that improvement possible. Just as the people of Currituck did a number of years ago in 1919 and raised that $1,000 from the local community, or $1,200 if you add both groups in, to build this school. I would hate to see this building destroyed. Thank you. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if the staff may provide some additional information, I think it's important to put this whole issue in a certain context. We have been working for probably 10 years identifying structures throughout the county that would not meet minimum standards, excuse me, or become considered public nuisance. In that time frame, we have probably been successful in raising probably 20 facilities. This facility was not on that original list. It was brought to us through a complaint. The Board of Commissioners are not the ones that had requested that this facility be added to that list. Again, the community had come to us and had raised an issue and concern about the public safety of that facility, and that's how it ended up on the list. And I would like, if the county attorney may, go through a procedural to explain how long we have actually been working on the efforts that we've undertaken to try to get this facility protected and saved.
Mr. McCready.
Yes, at least, Mr. Chairman, as far back as October 2009, when the Board of Commissioners at that time endorsed the corridor cleanup initiative, a notice was sent to property owners, at least listed on the tax records, the property owners with regard to this particular structure, and the county received no response. Thereafter, a title search was done to try to identify any additional individuals that might have ownership interest in this particular piece of property, and that was completed on or about January 4th, 2010, at which time the information was provided to the building inspector so he could again initiate, as he's required by statute, the ordinance, and by the corridor sweep initiative that the Board of Commissioners had adopted at the time, to proceed forward with regard to this structure, along with a number of others within the county. Thereafter, our notes show that in March of 2010, we received communication or contact from the Barringtons, or some of the Barrington family who evidently live in the Tidewater area, who had, I guess, had received communication from the building inspector, and they began to raise some questions with regard to the property, the taxes that might be owed on the property. My understanding, the notes show that they may became current on the taxes that were due. They also presented some information and discussion about other persons maybe that claimed ownership of the building, although they disputed that out of some family issues and a will that may not have yet been probated from a mother who had died some years ago. Then in January 18th of this year, Ms. Barrington called to say that she had spoken with Ms. Snowden about the possible historic nature of the property, that she and her sister wanted to restore the building, although they had placed it up for sale, and they were attempting to get some grant money. The county had no further communication from them until, I say January 27th, then a memorandum was sent by the Barringtons to the building inspector at that time to say what their plan was or what they were intending to do. The building inspector continued on with his process, however, and issued a notice and complaint because, as the county manager had said, we also had received a complaint from the community regarding the structure, and a hearing was scheduled for February 28th, 2011, at which time the property owners could appear before the chief building inspector to present whatever information they had in that form to cause him to delay or to consider various options available to the building inspector in that type of proceeding. On February 28th, the morning just prior to the hearing, the chief building inspector received a fax memorandum from the family that owns the property asking that the hearing be continued because they were unable to attend, and again that they want an extension of time to gather more historical facts regarding the structure. The county heard nothing more from them, although the chief building inspector did agree to continue the hearing until May 2nd. So from February 28th to May 2nd, the county had no further communication from the owners of the property or the status of these ideas plans that they were working on. On May 2nd, 2011, the chief building inspector convened the hearing as provided in the continuation notice to the property owners. No one attended. None of the property owners appeared at that hearing, despite having received notice of the continuation some months before. Thereafter, on May 5th, 2011, the chief building inspector, again as required by our ordinance and by statute, sent his order and decision to the property owners that they needed to demolish the structure due to its condition and his findings at the hearing. They refused to accept his order. It was sent by certified mail, and those were returned to the county. And so then, I guess, 2 more months went by until the chief building inspector, again, as part of the process and his requirement under the county ordinance and the statutes, presented to you an ordinance requiring compliance with his order, which would mean demolition of the structure. And then that brings us to tonight. So that is the history of this particular issue and this particular structure. It is not as if the county chose this one to be the first one.
But it is the first one.
And it's the first out of the box. As the manager also just stated to you, there was a book presented to the commissioners some years ago of a good number of structures in the county, at least half of which have already been taken down under this very same process.
The reason you did not hear from the owners is a very simple reason. They both died and had been in the hospital and nursing home for a number of years. When Mrs. Barrington contacted me, she has 7 brothers and sisters, and as all of you know, it takes a lot of time to get a family to agree to anything. The Barringtons have agreed that if we can find someone to take the building, that we can move the building. Now, our question is it going to be there long enough for us to start the process of trying to find someone to save this building? Just for your own information, Currituck County had 3 Rosenwald schools. The one in Gregory is no longer there. The one in Moyock is now used as an apartment, and you cannot recognize it as a Rosenwald school. Now, I don't want to be mean and say I don't want us to be at the bottom of the list, but nationally, Rosenwald schools are being saved. Martin County just saved one. Halifax just saved one. Cheltenham has saved two. And so we only have two left. And I would like to see that if we cannot save at least one of them.
Barbara, generally, where do they get their funding to do the renovations and that type of stuff?
Well, a lot of it is private, and a lot of it is grants. The Rosenwall has the advantage, I'm going in and out, I'm sorry, I apologize for that. The Rosenwall has an advantage if it is taken over by a nonprofit. Lowe's, as a North Carolina company, there were more Rosenwall schools, 800 in North Carolina, than any other southern state. And Lowe's Building Supply has taken that as a project to restore Rosenwall schools. That would be the first source we would go to. To stabilize it, we'll have to raise the money locally to buy the plywood, and we have to get the manpower, which would mean going around the building, cutting the bushes away, making sure that the windows are stable, and then putting something over the roof. That is the first step in preservation, is to stabilize a building. We may stabilize it and then find that we don't have anybody to take us up on moving it. So, but as I said in my short presentation, I could not stand before you as a history person and as a resident of Currituck County and not ask that this building be saved. I can't save them all. I wish I could, but I can't. But I think this is one that we might have a chance of saving and doing something with.
Mr. Scannell, haven't we decided that we were going to give them ample time to do just exactly what she's talking about? Is that not-
Yes, sir, you have. I do think it's important. First of all, I thought it was important that we put the project in context of overall what we're doing, and that this was not brought to you in some happenstance way, that we do have complaints. But if the board would like, staff could bring to you language at your next meeting to stay your action. We have slowed our process, but we are moving under an order, so we would have to bring something back officially to you, asking you to stay the action and the order, and we certainly are prepared to do that if that's the direction you'd like to go in.
I have a question for that
Yeah,
regarding.
that sounds fine with me. What's the pleasure of the board?
Make it so.
I would make it happen.
Well, everybody's acting like we haven't already said we're going to do that.
know.
I've
Well, you
communicated that. I've communicated that to you
Yes.
and several other people that we were not going to tear this building down.
But-
So all we need is for you to bring that forward. To
I have a
make it
question
official.
related to that, though. I'm trying to reach in. Is
Yeah, Mr.
how
Lee-
long are we going to stay the order to do this? Is this a 10-year project, a 10-month project, a month? Do you know?
You're
Can you
asking
give us
me to tell you that, and I don't know the answer to that. I do know that we have talked to people, and we have made preliminary plans to have, by the end of November, to try to have this building stabilized.
As you pointed out so succinctly in the Historical Society meeting the other night, the first thing is a plan.
Yes.
And you need to find out what the options are.
Right.
And I pointed out, too, that I think the significance of this particular project is the national renown of the Rosenwall Foundation compared to the other historical preservations we've tried to do here locally, that you have a much better chance of getting attention to do this. All I'm saying is that I don't know that we want to do an open-ended ad infinitum halt on the proceedings, because those proceedings are really what got you the cooperation of the family. Otherwise, we would still be waiting to hear from them if they didn't think we were serious about taking action.
Well, sir, I don't think it's a 10-year project. I think that we can have it stabilized by the first of the year. And the main thing is I've got to find somebody to come forward and take the building, or so we can move it, or somebody that's willing to buy the property from the family and restore it themselves.
But what I would ask is if you would just keep us apprised of what's happening,
Yes.
so that we know what's going on. I think that would make us much more comfortable with the
And
process.
Mr. O'Neill, I need to answer your question too. Yes, you did call me and you told me that y'all will hold off, but I'll be honest, I figure that this is too big of a project for me to know that alone, and part of the reason I'm here tonight is so that the people of Currituck County, those ones who've called me and emailed, will know that y'all have said y'all would slow down.
They've called me and emailed me too.
Yes, and I do appreciate the fact that y'all will bring forward at our next meeting the plans to, what was the correct word, Dan, so I can have
To stay the order.
stay the order so that we can have some time. I would also encourage anybody who would like to know something about the Rosenwald schools. It was very fascinating to do the research. I'm not going to make y'all read it, but this is the result from.
You didn't used to do that in history class in high school.
Sir, I don't have as much power as I did back then.
I might
If you would like, I can make it an official assignment because I see enough of my former students here to say that I could do that. But no, I appreciate you listening to me. I appreciate you listening to what the people in the community, and I hope and pray that we can work something out on this building.
One other thing, too, that you might mention that Nancy Proctor has actually established a website for this, the Currituck
Yes.
Historical Connection,
Yes.
Currituck Heritage Connection, I believe
Yes,
it's called.
yes.
So any of you that are interested in this project that want to contact her to get involved, go to Currituck Heritage Connection, I believe it's .com,
Yes, I think so.
and you can sign up, and she'll push news feeds to you to let you know what's going
And
on.
I'll be glad to give you a bush hawk or a hammer and nails and see you at the end of this month. Thank you.
Did you have a comment?
Yes,
or a
ma'am. I have a question. Mr. Scanlon, what are we doing about the person that registered the complaint? Are they willing to go along with the stay?
After receiving the complaint, it then becomes the role and responsibility of the relevant county staff and the county to proceed forward with the process. So I don't want to say they don't have a say. I mean, I think it's up to this board to make a determination as to when the ultimate order would be carried out.
Has anyone contacted them to say this is what we're trying to do?
We certainly will.
Yeah, I mean, just to let them know, we're,
Well, I think it's important that we make it very clear that we took the action based on the complaints. It was not something the county initiated. And I don't want anybody to think that we did.
Ms. Snowden,
Yes.
I brought you a magazine. It's called Eastern Living.
Uh-huh.
It's a Down East magazine. There's an article in here about that Hamilton
Yes.
restoration.
It's beautiful.
Have you read the article?
I have not read the article, but I've seen the building. The interesting thing is they're using, in fact, almost all the Rosenwald schools that have been restored are being used as community buildings for people to have meetings and to have a place that they can could gather.
But it gives where they got some of their grants
Yes.
and how they put it together in that article. So I thought you might could.
At our
use it.
historical meeting Monday night, we did a little bit of unusual scheduling. We had Harry Thompson, curator of the Port of Plymouth Museum, to be our speaker, but he is also the one who's done the fundraising for the Martin County, so we were able to pick his brain at that meeting also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Snowden.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment also. Since the decision of the board that we made to move forward with that property, my phone is ringing off the hook, and I'm sure my other cohorts are getting the same thing with other properties that are being looked at, and complaints are coming in, and Ben and his staff are working diligently to resolve some of those issues. So on the same token, those folks that have called me and brought it to my attention and made complaints, we're working on them. So just there is a timeline that things need to happen. So I just ask your patience on that.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Mr. Snowden one question? I see on a website here that the Currituck Rosenwald School has been under study since June the 12th of 2008.
Yes.
How long does it take them to make a finding?
Well, what happened, part of that study was as a result of the survey that you had done. When you had Meg Malvasi do the building survey, she selected 10 properties to take them to the advisory board of the National Register to get them on the study list. And so that's how those properties got on the study list as a result of the building survey that y'all did. And that's what that refers to. Also, at the same time, they were doing a statewide survey of, excuse me, they were doing a statewide survey, seeing if they could find any Rosenwald schools in North Carolina. And we were able to document the 2 that we had here in Currituck. And I guess I'm going to take this as a public forum. The one thing we have not been able to find is a picture of the Gregory Rosenwald School. It was torn down about 5 years ago.
I got it here.
A lot of people have it in their head, but we've not been able to produce a black and white photograph of it. So when it says that they're studying it, that was part of the Rosenwall study that was done statewide. Claudia Brown, I think, headed that particular study.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Moving along, item number 3, Dr. Edward Hauser, presentation on the free dental clinic. Please come forward and give your name and address for the record, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Dr. Ed Hauser. I live at 112 Hickory Hill in Grandy, North Carolina. I am a dentist living here in the county, and I would just like to bring you up to date on a project that I have begun working for Currituck County, and that is the Currituck Free Dental Clinic. It has been organized as a nonprofit organization to serve both adults and children of need here in our county. The clinic will be funded by grants and donations, and the workforce of the clinic will be volunteers. I will be leading the clinic. I will be volunteering my time as a dentist, and I hope to find other dentists who will also volunteer, as well as dental assistants and dental hygienists. The clinic itself will be a mobile clinic. I have on my own purchased a 10 by 30 foot trailer that will have to be towed from location to location. And my thoughts are to find 3 or 4 locations in the county where the clinic could be moved on a round-robin basis, so that those people in need who particularly can't afford transportation would have better opportunity to get to the clinic. The clinic itself will have 2 complete dental operatories, that is 2 chairs and full x-ray facilities. I plan at this point to have the clinic open on or around the first part of November of this year. It will take approximately 3 more weeks to complete the renovation of the trailer, and I am currently waiting approval from both the state and the federal government to operate the clinic as a nonprofit health care facility. I would anticipate, hopefully, the cooperation of the state and federal government to have that done. The reason I come tonight is that in time I would hope that all of you would help me identify those locations around the county that we could locate the clinic so that the population could be best served. Hopefully, as I said, that would be 3 or 4 different locations. We would ideally need electric and water to run the clinic. If you have any questions of me, I certainly would be glad to answer those, and as we get closer to that November 1st date, I would be more than happy to bring you back information about exactly when we will open.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, comments?
I'd like to make a comment, if I could. Dr. Hauser is a member of our local Rotary Club, the Currituck Wild Goose Rotary Club, that is trying to help as best we can for that. We have a grant application in for this. But I just want to emphasize the fact that he, on his own initiative, went and found this unit and paid for it and had it towed down here to do that. And we're hoping to compensate him back through the Rotary Foundation for some of the effort. But I think this is a marvelous asset for the county to provide that kind of care for people that don't have access to it otherwise. And hopefully we can find some. I suggested perhaps locations adjacent to our senior centers in the different places where the utilities might be available for it.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. With Chief Glover here, is this something we could do at a fire station?
That's something we could look into. I don't know that they can accommodate some of the hookups, but we could look see if they're available. I'll talk to the chiefs about it.
Does that sound doable? You're on nothing.
Plenty of those, too.
Yeah, I mean, senior centers, there's plenty of opportunities.
Plenty of places
Yeah.
you can operate.
Got some room at the
from.
airport.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
certainly
much.
anything that you could do in helping me designate those locations, I would greatly appreciate.
And again, thank you very much on behalf of people of Currituck.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think what he would need to do is get to the county manager what your requirements are for the clinic. Hookups, for water, for electricity. You'd need 110, 220. What do you need in order to operate this? And I think you need to get that information to the manager, so then you can narrow down the locations much better.
That's a good point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
I'd like to do one other call out too. Thanks to Mr. Woody for working with him and helping get the permitting and everything accomplished for this.
Again, thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Moving along, item 3A, we have a presentation by Centera Group.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Meryl Amdursky, and I am the Executive Director of the Centera Health Foundation. And I'd like to thank you for letting me come and present to you tonight. Many of you remember that back in the summer of 2009, I made a presentation to you on the Nightingale Air Ambulance. At that time, we reviewed the importance of Nightingale to Currituck, the patients that were reaching advanced medical care and how important it was to get them there quickly. We also talked about how the use of this air ambulance service could get them to the Level 1 Trauma Center at Centera Norfolk General within 20 minutes at times, or the Heart Center or the Stroke Center. So clearly the Nightingale serves a critical value to the health of Currituck County. At that time as well, we asked you for your partnership as we secured over $7 million to purchase a brand new Eurocopter 145. This helicopter was going to be equipped with advanced safety features including GPS, weather tracking, and night vision capability. We were most grateful that Currituck responded with generous support and set the bar for other communities to participate. I am here tonight to thank you for that leadership and to let you know that our new Nightingale is fully operational and in service as of June 30th of this year. We are most appreciative of your generosity in the county and for making this emergency service a priority among the many, many needs of the community. As a token of our appreciation, I present to you the framed photo of this new Nightingale in flight with our ongoing thanks. Further, I will be sending Mr. Scanlon an update as to Currituck Nightingale missions and milestones with the new helicopter. And we really wish to continue this partnership with you, and we wish to report back to you on your investment in this service. Finally, I invite you to come and see the new Nightingale firsthand at your upcoming airport event, which is going to be held on October the 8th. Between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m., the Nightingale crew will be there to answer your questions and also to let you know how much your commitment means to them. So with that, I say thank you, and if I could ask you to stand up and get a little more exercise so I can take your picture again, I'd really appreciate it.
One, two,
Three.
Pushing a button.
You are?
Turn the camera on.
Yeah, is the camera on?
Camera's on.
Yeah. Did it?
Let me just make sure it's the right side.
Okay.
Strike again. 1, 2, 3.
There you go.
There we go.
One more, please. Okay, so fire me for being a photographer. Thank you.
You're doing pretty good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I hear it coming into station number 5 in Grandy, and so that's not. It's a good sound, but it's a bad sound.
I know. We're glad to be able to serve you.
Thank you very much. I've seen it. It's beautiful because I'm down at Centerra fairly often.
Good. I'm so glad. I don't know who to give this to, but it's.
All my friends have helicopter engines now.
It's like, thank you so much.
Okay. Get everybody out there.
But before you leave, on behalf of the citizens of Currituck County, we certainly appreciate the service that you provide to us through the Nightingale system. It's tremendous, the distance that we live from urgent care facilities or advanced care facilities. That golden hour really means something, and we're very appreciative of what support you provide here. So thank you. Next on the agenda is item 4, public hearing and action, PB 11-06, Currituck County, request to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 4, Overlay Districts to establish an airport overlay district and an amendment to the zoning map. Mr. Woody.
Mr. Chairman, before we begin, as in the past, I've always asked to be recused from any discussions or actions taken at the airport, and I had a conversation with Mr. McCree, the county attorney, this afternoon, and I'd like for him to speak to that for this.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. There are only 2 instances in which a commissioner may excuse themselves from consideration of a matter. That's if, first of all, it directly affects their financial interest or their personal conduct or individual conduct. It is my opinion that in this instance, because you are considering a matter that relates to zoning over a portion of the county that just may happen to include property of Commissioner Etheridge's family, that there would not be that requisite conflict of interest that would allow for his recusal from considering the matter. Bottom line is it is not a conflict of interest for him to participate, and in addition, he must under the state law.
Okay, so you're saying he's
Yes.
good to go to stay in
Yes,
session?
he is.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Woody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a request by the Currituck County Planning Department to establish an airport overlay district, which means you're not only amending the zoning map to map the district, but you're also amending the text of the UDO to establish requirements and things related to the district. So it's a 2-pronged action. And what I'm going to do tonight, I've got a brief PowerPoint presentation that you've seen parts of this before, but I want to do it again for you, and also do it so folks watching at home can have a chance to see this as well. I'm going to go through the process of how we got to this point, how we got to where we are tonight. I'm going to go through the role our small area plan played in this process. And finally, I'm going to go through just some specific information about the overlay so you can understand what this does and what the goals are. I'll tell you, as we've done this, and you'll see on the next slide, we've been at this for a while. Staff's worked hard to be responsive to comments we've received from the community. The challenge is trying to be responsive but also maintain the integrity of the ordinance. We've made an effort to strike that balance. I'll note that planning is a long-range endeavor. It's a proactive approach towards trying to determine what your community will be in 10 or 15 years. So a lot of this is looking forward to what's going to happen in this part of the county down the road. So with that, let's kind of get into this. We started this. This is kind of a rundown of the meetings we've had related to this overlay district. We started this not knowing we were going to start this, but we did a Maple Barco small area plan. That was the county's first small area plan. Through that process, we had a number of community meetings, tried to have a presence in the Maple Barco community. That started in 09, went through, actually it started in 08, went through 09, so we were there for a number of time, or a number of, months actually working on this. After we adopted the Maple Barco small area plan, an implementation step of that plan was to explore establishing an overlay for the airport, given some of the attributes or some of the potential that the airport promises for the future. Of course, the challenge with that is trying to balance that with the community that exists out there now. Once we started on the overlay, we had a couple of open house meetings. We tried to mail out mass postcards and get people to join us for meetings. Had one in August in 2010, one in February 11. We met with the Airport Advisory Board on 3 separate occasions, May 2010 and January and April in 2011. Planning Board we met with on 3 separate occasions, March, May, and June. Those meeting minutes are in your packets for review. Had a work session with the Board of Commissioners in July of this year. And, of course, as we always do, we've tried to put some information on the focus on Currituck on our website. We got some newspaper articles, which is probably the best publicity you can get in some respect. Not the best necessarily, but it draws attention to what you're doing. So we got a couple of newspaper articles following the Airport Advisory Board. And finally, we've had the public hearing announcement for this meeting in particular. So we've made an effort to be visible and try to be out in the community with this process. So let's start with where it begins. The Maple Barco Small Area Plan. That was the plan where you focus, and all small area plans are like this, you focus on a geographic part of the community, a specific area, with the idea that in this instance, that how do we balance growth and economic expansion with the character of that community. Got a lot of stuff going on in Maple Barco. We got an established neighborhood or residents that live there, so you're trying to balance a lot of competing interests in that area. In that planning effort, we tried to take into account the growth of the airport facility, what the airport may be 10, 15, 20 years from now, protecting environmental resources. In this area of the county, there's a lot of water quality issues. Our drinking water is there, for example, so we do want to be concerned about how the airport or any other industrial development may impact those types of environmental issues. And finally, ways to preserve. One thing that came through in the plan was the idea of preserving agrarian heritage. It's a rural area. It's got wonderful view sheds of the Currituck Sound. I think it's one of the prettiest stretches of highway we have in the county. And it's the headwaters to the North River, so there's a lot of important features in this area. Related to the airport, what are some of the things out of that plan that kind of related to the airport? One is, what is the economic impact of the airport? Do we fully utilize that facility? What is the potential impact of that airport in the future? What are the existing and proposed transportation elements that impact Maple Barco? Think about the traffic that goes through to the beach. Think about 158, which will be a 4-lane facility, shortcut road. Think about the potential of the Mid-County Bridge. There's a lot at the airport. There's a lot of transportation infrastructure that exists in this node of the county. So there's a lot of potential there. There's a diverse mix of land uses. You've got a what I would call a tranquil rural community along Maple Road. You've got some commercial uses near the intersection of the 2 highways. The county has the airport. The county's investing money in a community center, which will draw people to this part of the county. So there's a lot of interesting there is an interesting mix of land uses in this part of the county. And finally, the small area plan came forward with a recommendation to establish an overlay zone to promote some compatibility among land uses, i.e., how do we grow in a sensible way in this part of the county. That's kind of the future land use map of the small area plan. I'm not going to dwell on that, but it kind of set up areas for different types of investment or land uses. So let's get into it now. So that's the small area plan. It said here's some potential, here's some things we may want to consider. So let's talk about what's an overlay district. An overlay district is a zoning designation that modifies or establishes additional use restrictions or standards for a defined geographic area. Best way I can explain that is if you have GB zoning and it's in Corolla, it's in Maple, and it's in Modoc, it's the same. It doesn't recognize differences in geography, infrastructure, or physical assets. Overlay zoning is a way to go into a particular area of the county, be it a handful of parcels, be it more than 300 as in this case, and create zoning that applies to a certain geographic area that hopefully helps you accomplish what it is you're trying to accomplish. So it's a zoning tool. What is the purpose of an airport overlay district? I am not going to read this to you. I'm going to go quickly. Promote health, safety, and welfare, which is the purpose of zoning. In addition, to promote the economy of the airport area. Encourage aviation-related uses in close proximity to our airport, as well as compatible non-residential uses. Try to protect the character and stability of existing land uses in the vicinity of the airport. Promote interconnectivity. We got all this transportation infrastructure. Do we connect to it? Are we building connections so we can take our truck traffic off roads like Maple Road? We need that connectivity between 158 and 168 for alternate ways to move people around. Preserve natural resources. Remember that we've got our county drinking water out here. That's probably the most important thing in this county. So it's good to remember that when you have industrial land uses near your drinking water, you're paying attention to what those land uses are and what impacts they may have. And finally, promote sustainable development patterns consistent with the land use plan and the small area plan. So that's what the purpose is. Let's talk about the boundary. The boundaries of the Airport Overlay District, and I'll show you a better map, are based on recommendations from the FAA. We really tried not to be arbitrary with these boundaries. We tried to come up with boundaries that were used in other communities, and the FAA puts forward some guidance on overlay district boundaries that are intended for small to medium general aviation airports. And that's what we have here. So if you go and do research on other communities with similar type airports, you'll see a similar type of boundary configuration. So we basically took what was out there and tried to make it work for Currituck County. And these boundaries are based on runway length. Wetlands, I do want to show this. You see this boundary, and it does grab a lot of land. It's a big boundary, but also in this area there's a lot of wetlands too. So in some respects, a lot of the stuff around the airport is either wetlands, it's smaller lot development along Maple Road. To the east of the airport, you've got some county activity and some larger tracts that have potential for non-residential or aviation-related uses. So you've got a lot of, and then to the north end of the runway, to the northeast end, you have some open lands that are currently under cultivation that have the potential to develop into something someday.
Ben, let me stop you just one second. The area that is circled in blue,
yes,
what impact does that have to the property owners and the landowners?
I will go through that in a second. I've got that actually. That's in the next slide. It's good timing. So let's talk about what it means. What's the bottom line? What's this mean? You've got 3 areas, and I'll tie this back to the map in a second. What you've got is this overlay accomplishes a number of things. One is it limits residential density adjacent to the airport and in the flight path. What I mean by that is if you're building houses, you're having homes or places of assembly, it limits places of assembly too. The FAA recommends that you don't put those types of uses in the flight path of the approach zone or adjacent to the runway. The idea is that the closer you are to the runway, and that is the red area and the green area, the closer you are to the runway or the more you're in the flight path, the greater chance you'll be impacted by aviation operations. I'm not saying that planes are going to fall out of the sky and crash into your house, but you're going to have more approaches and departures come over your property. So the idea is that you try to limit or discourage residential in those critical areas. Now, one thing I'll note is, and that's where we've had a lot of discussion with the community, it was brought to my attention earlier today, and I don't think it's a bad idea, but if you do decide to allow some residential in these approach zones and adjacent to the runway, you probably need to have some sort of use permit or some kind of standard that puts a test or some kind of criteria for how that may occur. Because again, ideally, you just don't want to have a lot of small lot residential in your approach paths, in your flight paths. Height limits. We have height limits that are in the Code of Ordinances now. Those are moving over as they are written, no change. We're just putting them in the zoning ordinance. So it's all in one place. If you're looking for airport stuff, you go to one place. Lighting, and this applies for all the for the entire overlay. The idea that non-residential use is required to have what's called full cutoff fixtures. What that means is the light projects downward. You don't have light pollution that goes up. So when you have industrial uses or non-residential uses, you're not creating conflicts with the pilots trying to use the airport facilities, but also I think it's an interesting proposal because it keeps Maple as it develops a little darker. You try to have this downward directed lighting so it maintains that rural character. This would apply to the airport as well. So as we build stuff, we have to use the full cutoff lighting. Disclosures. This is probably a very important component of this, and again, this applies to the entire overlay, the breadth of all the property. The disclosure says that, number one, if you subdivide property, you have to put a note on your plat. So if I'm a developer or I'm a owner of land and I subdivide it, there will be a note on the plat in the Register of Deeds that says this property is in close proximity to the Currituck County Airport. So if you buy it, you know there's an airport there. And you'd be surprised how many folks know that but are surprised when there's planes that go in and out of the airport. The other thing it does, and this kind of came as a out of the last work session. It also includes a requirement that real estate transactions have to be accompanied by a disclosure statement. In North Carolina, there's a Real Estate Disclosure Act that requires that realtors disclose any kind of zoning restrictions or zoning requirements that apply to a property. So this reinforces that. The county will provide a form that you can use as a realtor, but also the state of North Carolina has a disclosure form. So this kind of reinforces the idea that through real estate transactions, that information is provided to the potential buyer. Promote connectivity. We're trying to find ways to connect things for cars, but not just cars. Think about the idea of putting a YMCA there or whatever. We want to have the ability for folks to bike and walk there. That's down the road as we build capacity, but just things to keep in mind. And finally, we've put in some criteria that limits the type of land uses in close proximity to our drinking water. So what we're saying is if you're building or you're developing close to a well, and this is principally around county properties, you're going to be limited in having like chemicals or things that may contaminate the water supply. So basically on those criteria, all those apply to the entire overlay district. That where you have the variation is residential densities, as I mentioned. In the blue areas, the broader area, you're allowed to develop at the density of the underlying zoning district, which is capped at 1 unit per acre, which is our typical Currituck density, 1 unit per acre. The red areas right now have a minimum lot size of 4 acres. However, there's an exemption that allows you to initiate family subdivisions under that 1 acre lot requirement. So if you own the land and you want to cut up lots for your family, then you can still take advantage of that typical Currituck 1 acre lot. But it does have a 4 acre minimum for residential in that red area, and those are the areas closest to the airport. And then the green area has a 3 acre minimum, which is consistent to our agricultural zoning districts. Although I'll say in the north end of the green area, there's some land that's zoned RA. So again, there is some limits on how subdivision occurs. It limits the residential densities in these green and red areas. And I want to be upfront about that. So that's probably the area that's distinguished in this is Zone 1 and 2, which is the red and green areas. Now let me speak to a couple of things. As we went through this process, we have tried to be reflective of comment and modify this. Again, we're trying to promote development that's sensible, that makes sense around the airport, but we're also trying to be sympathetic or reasonable for the property owners. And we added the family subdivision exemption to allow folks to be able to subdivide these 1 acre lots close to the airport for the purposes of giving to their family and their sons, granddaughters, etc. We've backed off the residential density limits as we moved through this. At one point, we had some limits for the bigger area, but we've completely removed that. We modified the boundary to reflect the approach patterns. We had some fans that I can't really explain it. We had some fans that kind of reflected the approach zone, but we tried to modify that to be the boundary represents more where a plane actually, in theory, approaches and departs. It comes off the runway. And you can see, I'll just show you the green area does that. Now, that's basically the approach zone.
Can I ask you a question
Yes.
about approaches and departures? We're designating the area where that is, but what the actual departure and approach is an entirely different subject than a zoning issue, correct?
It is. Zoning doesn't have, zoning can designate where the logical approach and departure would be, but we can't mandate that through zoning.
Right.
So
So
no.
does our ordinance reflect that departure and landing area?
Our zoning ordinance reflects what's promoted by the FAA.
So our approach and departure is determined by the FAA. But do we have an ordinance that reflects that? In other words, do we have something that when a pilot comes in, this is where you take off and this is what the flight pattern is and we expect you to do that?
We don't have an ordinance, to my knowledge, that establishes that because it's not within your jurisdiction to establish that.
Well, ordinance isn't a good word. Do we have informational advisories, charts, or whatever for pilots that lets them know that's the approach and takeoff?
To my knowledge, the FAA publishes material per airport, and it will tell you or tells a pilot what the approach protocol is for each airport.
So that's totally a FAA. Yeah.
We also, in trying to address concerns from the community, have included information on our weather station. So when a pilot comes in to get the weather, we have the ability to include additional information on that, and we try to reinforce the flight pattern around our airport.
Again, jurisdiction is not ours, though.
That's correct. We just try to educate.
Okay.
Okay, and in the same vein is that, okay, if it's not within our jurisdiction, I mean, it just seems to me if people are coming in and landing and flying over people's houses and that type of stuff, that that it could certainly, Mr. Gilbert, wouldn't that be something that the airport board and the airport manager could address and try to figure out some type of process to improve to get the information out so folks
Yes,
know?
and I don't know. I'm not a pilot, but a couple of the pilots at our advisory board meeting elaborated on the flight patterns, the directional takeoff, landings, and there are, I don't want to say strict patterns, but the winds. I mean, there's lots of factors that plays into how they take off and how they land. And certainly you can't say, okay, today is Tuesday, the only way that you can come in is this landing pattern. And I don't know if any of our pilots that are here want to address that. John, you're a pilot, and I know Ed Ish, he's on the advisory board, and he has also addressed that with the committee to educate us on that landing pattern. But it is an FAA guideline, and that kind of draws the path.
Do we have an appeal process with the FAA that we can say our pilots would like to, maybe a consideration for a change?
I wouldn't call it an appeal process, but you certainly have the ability to make suggestions and recommendations to them. But it's up to them to dispense with those as they see
No,
fit.
but if our pilot said, "Is this something we can look at?" We have the ability to go to the FAA and say, "Would you look at this?"
Yes, we do.
In addition to that, I mean, you have your runways that don't move. It's just kind of like your roadways. I mean, you've got guidelines that when you drive a car down the road, you have rules and regulations, and it's the same. It's applicable to pilots also.
I'll address one point on that, really. When we're talking about the impact zones, we're really talking about the impact of noise and traffic. We're not talking about the impact of an airplane into a house generally, which I think people tend to connote that. The physical limitations of operating aircraft pretty much preclude they follow a set pattern which the FAA designates for all airports, including uncontrolled airports, as this one, which is basically a rectangular racetrack type pattern, which is about a half a mile out from the runway and extends whatever is necessary to gain the height to clear going in and out of the airport. The FAA leaves the actual operation of the aircraft up to the pilot for safety purposes because they're responsible for that. But generally, pilots are pretty conscientious about noise issues because they get complaints all the time from it, with the exception sometimes of military helicopter pilots who seem to think they can go wherever they want to, whenever they want to, and make whatever noise they like at whatever time of the morning. So we don't have any control over that, and neither does the FAA. But I don't think, other than providing the advisories at the airport, which Chesapeake Airport does because of the proximity of residential development in their airport area there, which has worked quite well. They put advisories on the door. You walk out and they say, please don't go this way, go that way, and everybody does. So I don't think really it's going to be a material problem.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Wood.
That's okay. That's a good question. And I think that we're trying to establish land use patterns that make the most sense for how you would hope pilots would fly. So I think that's my understanding, too, is that the airport advisory board or the airport manager just has to continue to educate people and putting out information that says this is our preferred flight pattern to avoid turning over the houses on Maple Road, for example. Good question. And we did, and Commissioner Rohr, we did change. We had the FAA calls them impact zones, and we did change that to compatible use zone, which is a similar term used in Virginia. So we did get away from the impact zone term. And of course, we added the property disclosure statement. These are things we modified. The property disclosure statement that reference the general statutes. So what's this mean if you're an existing property? If you have a lot, a piece of land, and you've got a house on it, you're not required to make any changes to your existing property or structure. So if I live in a house in Brady Landing, for example, or wherever, my house is my house, my lot is my lot, it's not impacted. If you're changing the use of your property, if you're moving towards, like, for example, a commercial property, you'll have to have lighting that complies. If you're developing land or building new things or subdividing, you'll have to comply. So remember, this doesn't require any kind of retrofitting of property. It's something that comes into play when property develops, or in the case of the disclosure statement, when property sells. So it's not a retroactive ordinance. And this is wrapping up for me. We as we developed this, we tried to use resources. We looked at other communities, our small area plan. We looked at FAA guidance and documentation. We tried to work with our consultants, Talbert and Bright, who've worked on the airport layout plan. That's kind of the vision of where the airport's going. And, of course, we use planning resources that are available to us. And with that, I'm going to just conclude my presentation, be happy to answer any questions or any specifics or respond to any comments that are given. And I'll leave the map up.
Any questions for Mr. Woody?
One more
Yes, sir.
question. The lighting ordinance is protection to the pilot, but it's also going to protect the surrounding community from the bleed over of industrial type lighting into the neighborhoods as well.
It should. I think that's an excellent ordinance, and I wish we did it countywide. But yes, it'll have a nice impact on keeping a developing area somewhat dark, a growing area.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing. We have two people signed up to speak. First, Mr. John Snowden. We have Mr. McCree, if you'll be our timekeeper, please, sir.
3 minutes per speaker.
That's what our established coordinates procedures are, yes.
Name is John Snowden. I live at 180 Maple Road.
Yes, sir.
I'm also a member of the airport board. I think, kind of divert here, the question you were asking about the FAA ordinance is what you're looking at is called a NOTAM. It's a notice to airmen. You can establish approaches and define hazards on the airport in a notice to airmen, which is published. I'm not even sure how often they're published, but they're published in a directory for each airport. And typically the pilots will tell you look at the notice to airmen to see what the hazards are. I think right now on the FAA site, the hazard was deer on the runway, wildlife, things like that. You can establish an approach. You can establish a departure in lieu of consideration of your residences or sensitive areas on each side.
What was that called again, John?
NOTAM, NOTAM, Notice to Airmen.
Thank you.
I've requested as an airport board member that at our next meeting we discuss approaches and departures. Now, we've not met since April. Our meeting for this month is canceled. I don't know when we're going to meet, so I don't know when we're going to discuss it. But I will bring it up and I will push it. I don't know what the other board members will do. I can't guarantee anything. I came here tonight because you have a flawed process. Okay? At the planning board meeting, on the first meeting, I personally sent out $150 worth of postcards to 350 residents in Maple, Barco, and Currituck. About a dozen people showed up. If I hadn't sent those postcards out, and they said in this meeting that they responded to my postcard, on page 9 of your minutes, there's a misprint. It states that I urged them to come out and speak against. I did not. I urged them to come out and express their opinion, whether positive or negative. My postcard was totally neutral. The planning board, when you are doing something with this large a scope, this thing covers 8 square miles. It's not just a handful of residents around. You need to have a notification process that tells people this is going on. The pretty little postcards that the planning department sent out, and I applaud them for doing it. But the information, I used to publish a newspaper. I know a little bit about designing postcards and getting information out. You publish something on a yellow paper with black print and no pretty graphics or anything that says public notice, public meeting, they're going to read it. They don't get lost in the fluff. And I think that's your problem. You need to go for keep it simple and get the information out. My biggest question for you tonight, what are you going to do to protect the residents of Maple? You're protecting the airport pretty darn well. One of those slides you even said to protect the airport area, but you need to take area off of that. When this thing was originally proposed, it affected everybody all the way over South Currituck Road. It diminished the value of properties based on the development potential by as much as half. Going out to South Currituck Road, where they could only get a third of, I think it diminished that by half out there. There was some in closer, like Miss Snowden's property and Miss Mosby's. There's only a handful. There's only 4 properties there that have 4 acres and up. I think the largest is 17 acres. There's a 17, a 12, a 4, and the Catholic Church property is a 10.
That's
Those,
time, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead. I'll give you another
okay, thank you. But the biggest thing is this ordinance protects the county asset, but it doesn't protect the community. You put restrictions on the community. If I come in and I want something zoned heavy manufacturing, you're going to tell me what I can do with my property and what I can't. You're going to tell me mostly what I can't do. That I have to put buffering around my operation. Say I'm going to open a hammer mill. I'm going to make anvils. I'm going to make a lot of noise and I'm going to have a lot of traffic. You tell that guy what he can and can't do with his property. The airport makes a lot of noise and has a lot of traffic, but you're telling everybody outside what they can and can't do with their property. Something's wrong with that. I've brought this up over time. Mr. Scanlon can attest to this for those of you who haven't been here for long. We need buffering around the airport to protect the people around the airport. We've sat down in a meeting with Rick Barkus, who's on the Division of Aviation. He said it's possible. Did you not? I'll let you address that later, but we sat down and looked at this. I haven't just been critical. I have proposed solutions. You know, the cutoff lighting is great, but if you go back to 1990, 1993, this was a sleepy little concrete runway that was surrounded by trees, and you had a crop duster and an occasional pilot and probably a drug runner or two, because it was dark and it was quiet. It's out of the way. The first thing we did was cut all the trees down, so everybody knows the airport's there. The county has taken it upon itself to develop this sleepy little runway into something with a total disregard for the community. I'm asking you, the Board of Commissioners now that's considering this at the same time, to consider protecting the community. That's all I ask. Protect this community just as if you live there. Put some restrictions on where the planes how they can take off. Send the Navy a nice letter about flying their helicopters in at 10 o'clock at night. Because I guarantee you, if they come in after 10 o'clock at night, every one of your phones is going to ring up from me. You say people don't complain. People have complained. My mother said she called all the time before I moved back here. People eventually get an attitude of nothing's going to be done. You don't want that. Do something to protect the community. Don't just protect the asset. That's what I want you to do. Because I'm going to be living there for a long time. And like I said, when the helicopters come in at 11 o'clock at night, you're going to get tired of me calling and texting.
Thank you, John.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
If I may, I had asked Mr. McCready to address that question about the Navy. This might be a good time to let him just say in a minute what he found out.
Yeah, please do. And I agree with John on that issue. I mean, it's I wouldn't want to be woke up at 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night as well by a helicopter right over top of my house.
But the county is required by the FAA to, first of all, not discriminate with regard to use of the property by all classes of aircraft. So that's the first point. The second point is specifically related to government aircraft. The county is required by the FAA to make available its facilities and runway to government aircraft at all times. Mm-hmm. So those are the 2 points relative to military use of our facility.
But do they not still fall under the flight path guidelines that an airport does? I know at Oceana.
Military.
Huh?
Military.
Send them a letter and ask them to be good neighbors.
That, we can do that.
Well,
Do that.
I mean,
Helicopter's a different flight pattern. I mean, it doesn't go out. A helicopter goes straight up.
No, they actually go out, but they go
I mean,
in the opposite direction from
I know,
fixed
what I'm
wing.
saying is it's more of a straight up.
They actually take off pretty much the same pattern as a thing. That you think they go up straight, but they don't. They need forward motion to lift like that. The problem with them is they're so noisy. The big rotor makes a really strong beat noise, and it just aggravates everybody. But as the government pointed out, things built with federal money, and they'll use it when they want to.
Could we get a letter prepared to do that, to just ask them, as Mr. Snowden requested, to please be a good neighbor, and if it has an impact, so be it.
We
But, I mean,
certainly- we can certainly do that
We
if-
can make the effort.
If someone could let us know what branch of the military or who was out there, so we know what agency or who to send the letter to, certainly.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Scanlon, this isn't the first time that we've contacted the Navy or whoever it is that does this.
That is correct. We've contacted them on
On
helicopter operations.
numerous
and they've
occasions.
got trainer aircraft that come out also. We've contacted on those.
And I'm all for sending the letter, but I don't want people to think that the county's never contacted the military. I know of numerous times they've done it, and they basically just said, yeah, thank you, we're still going to do what we want to do. So we can send another friendly letter, but I think you were supposed to answer something that Mr. Snowden had asked.
Well, he had asked, we did,
About the buffering.
it's been probably a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. Mr. Snowden had complained again about noise from the airport, and we had scheduled a meeting where we brought down the Division of Aviation to come down. We met at the terminal building and talked about what remediation possibilities there might be to try to minimize noise. I think Mr. Snowden was advocating at the time either doing a berming or actually planting trees. And if I recall, I think the Division of Aviation didn't think a berm would be all that effective in mitigating noise for aircraft taking off and departing. They didn't seem to take much of a position one way or the other about trees. I guess as long as we had something that maintains a bit of a low profile, because anything that pierces the approach and part we actually got to take down. But we certainly can talk about. I think we did talk about looking at some kind of a vegetative buffer that could probably be planted down that line.
Okay, from the jail to the north, how far is it down to the end of the runway? I mean, that's where the residences are at. I mean, as you go to the south, from the jail south, there's no impact, really.
Mile. It's 1 mile. It's about a mile.
Is it a mile?
Well, I find it odd that we're being told we could plant trees. When they went in and clear cut it, I objected to cutting the trees and was told that they had to come down because I was contacted by Ms. Snowden and Mr. Snowden and advocated that those trees not be cut down and was told that no trees were allowed. So I'm surprised that now suddenly we can plant trees.
It depends on where you're talking about and what type of trees you're talking about, what their maximum height would be. As you get more towards, in the diagram in front of you, as you get into the red area and the green area, you certainly have got significant more height restrictions than you do off towards the sides. And I think what they were looking at is specifically the houses there around the Snowdens was more off the side of the runway. But yeah, it still would have to be a tree that did not attain but so much height, because yes, you'd be in there cutting it down or at least topping it. So, but there's a possibility of going in and planting something. But again, it could not be something that grew to 15 plus. It'd have to be a small profile.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Snowden, since the North Parallel Taxiway has been opened, have you noticed any difference in the sound since people now come and the pilots are at a different angle to your home as when they used to turn the opposite way?
Yeah, please, John, come back forward. Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think that's one of the things that Mr. Barkas had mentioned is the parallel taxiway is that the aircraft did their run-ups they would be positioned so that the noise actually should be moving away from. So I'd be curious to see. If you,
The prevailing wind there is northeast or southwest. That's why the airport's turned the way it is. The end up to the top of the screen is northeast, down there south. So if the wind's blowing from the southwest in the summertime, aircraft and particularly jets have to come down on that end. They take the taxiway, come out, and then they sit there and they run their engine up. The jets they're noisy, but once they run it up, they're gone. I mean, the biggest problem is general aviation aircraft, not so much the locals, because the locals know, but every now and then we get one that gets a wild hair, I guess. Instead of going out the way we've cut the trees down in that great big approach area, they want to go draft down Miss Snowden's field. Because they're going to make a left-hand turn into the pattern. And what I'm going to propose at the airport board is, instead of making it that they can turn at elevation, because basically I think it's about 500 feet, they can turn and go wherever they want to. If that guy rockets a small plane that starts at the southwest end, the bottom end, he can be in the air by half the runway, a little Cessna, and then he can be up at 500 feet, and he can be flying over Mr. Bray's house, which is further west than me. So what you got is airplanes that are turning and flying over houses, and airplanes that are climbing and banking are putting a lot of torque on the engines, and the noise just comes right down on top of the houses. What I would suggest in a NOTAM is giving a distance from the end of the runway. They can turn out on 168, and they're not over any houses. They're over the road. You know? That's the approach. You've got that red zone out there. My house is not in that red zone. My house is in the blue zone next to Maple Road on the northeast end of that little point that goes like that. You got a lot of houses over there, and these planes are just... The jets don't even... The jets go out, and they probably turn around Bell's Island, left or right. The general aviation airplanes and that little Navy trainer, he's sitting there doing loop-de-loops, and you can see the pilot in the seat. I mean, they're that close to the ground, and it's a turboprop engine, so it's making lots of noise. So that's... And Mr. Scanlon said about cutting the trees down. The trees that we addressed were the ones at the end of the runway. And Mr. Scanlon's right. They have to be... There's a plane there, and once those trees come up above that plane, and I think you did a survey before you cut them, and there was a significant number there that were breaking the plane of the flight path. I mean, my grandfather owned land that this was built from in the 40s. I have the original deed where he sold his land to the state to build the Navy, and they had an agreement in there where they could come in and cut the trees down as long as they laid them in firewood links on the property line. I mean, they were very practical. And they went in and did that. They would trim the flight path down every so often. I guess in recent years they hadn't done it. The biggest one are the ones along the side. If we don't have any protection on the side from the noise and the light, and the protection on the side would keep the airplanes from turning and going down that field, because that's what they want to do. So.
Okay. Thank you, John. Next, we have Mrs. Joanne Snowden.
I haven't got a whole lot to say. I worked with Mr. Woody and worked. He probably got tired of looking at me. But I told him, and he worked this out, but I wanted to just make sure in the subdivision residential purpose here that my family, my children, my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren, if I want to give them a lot, not to subdivide, to sell it, to have a bunch of people in there, I want it fixed so that I can do that. And when my great-granddaughter or grandson comes up and says, or they won't come up to me because I'll be gone by then, but anyway, they'll go to their mom or dad and say, Mama said I had a lot. I don't want this county to keep them from going back there. I have lived adjoining to that airport for over 50 years. I am getting used to the noise. The helicopters at night are something else. I've got these little sun charmer things in the window. When they go over, it just goes, bip, 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 bip. But anyway, I've got used to it. I just want it. The county has taken so much from me in the past, and I said, please don't tell me what I can do anymore with what I've got left. And if there's any way to have it put into this overlay, which I think Mr. Woody did a good job. He said something about, what was that? You said the family subdivision 2 degrees or something.
We made an exemption for family subdivisions.
That's right. But I want it in there so that it will be specified. I don't want another Brady land, and I don't want anybody back there but my family. But I want to know when I die that they've got a lot if they want it. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Woody, that has been taken care of, correct? And that is in the overlay ordinance?
It is, yes, sir.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this issue? No one else was signed up?
I'm not signed up. I'm not used to sign-up procedure.
Yes, sir. Come forward and state your name and address for the record.
I'm Ben Taylor, and been a few years since I've been before you, and it was most of you guys were in elementary school when that happened. So I've spent some time with Ben Woody and a few seconds with, and currently we own the post office property in Maple. And as written, the ordinance doesn't allow for that use nor any other use on that property. We don't think the intent was that, and I think Ben Woody agrees with it since our conversation, that we make a provision that we limit the permanent employees to, I think you said 5 an acre on that, and that would give a chance for a small office or a small, because there's room for something besides the post office on the property, or maybe in a small market or something to be there within the current zoning. So that if that could be done, I think you've got some idea of how to word that.
And that's in that in the red, the impact zone 1, the FAA does say that you should allow some very low intensity office type stuff. So we added that, so that allowance is in there to allow the post office or that type of office to occur in addition to other non-residential uses.
So that issue has been resolved?
That has been resolved, yes.
Okay.
But there's
the other issue is my brother's 2 guys are here with me. He just died at a hospital, but Wayne Taylor. When we subdivided the property after Daddy's death and Mom, I divided the property up. It was about equal on the west side of 168 and on the east side. I divided it. He picked the east side. I got the west side. So the post office is on the west side. I think we've resolved that. We're working okay. The east side is also in the flight path. We're in that area where John doesn't want the planes to fly, but they're going to anyway. That's where he wants them to fly. Okay, I'm used to. We used to go outside and look up and see what kind of plane it was. But I think there was some proposal to have some mixed use options, Ben, that would allow some moving around of things and having either residential like PUD. Is that being added for that?
I have not added that. What Mr. Taylor is getting at is there's a couple of pieces like this, a couple of pieces of properties that are in the flight path. So not the best place for residential, quite frankly, if that's where you're going to direct your plane traffic. So the property you currently speak of would be limited to 3-acre lots, which is.
But it's both 4 and 3. It's pieces, some in the red,
some in the red,
right,
some
right.
And I'll say, of course, that property may be better suited for some sort of non-residential use or something that didn't have people living there. But that said, if the county wants to allow some flexibility for residential in the flight paths, and I don't know if that's what we want to do or not, if we do, I think if you consider that, you've got to do it through some sort of use permit, some kind of finding or something. It just doesn't let people go out and continue to subdivide property in the flight path. So I did not include that. I left that as, and that's why I've got the question mark as an option for the board to consider.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
I'm assuming there's a difference in subdividing for a family member and subdividing for sales. That's what we're talking about. Is that right?
Yes, we distinguish between those two types of subdivisions in the ordinance.
Okay, but Mrs. Snowden is taken care of because it's subdivided in, I think, 1 acre. Is that what it was?
The family subdivision we exempted, that's correct.
And they were 1 acre. Mm-hmm. Now, sir, are you looking to do subdivided for family or subdivided for sale?
We have no idea what the property would be used for in the future. What we're trying to do is to ask for some flexibility in what might be something that we would come for as a special use permit that followed generally criteria, but not necessarily the specific criteria. And that's, but the real logic of allowing 1 acre for a family, why doesn't everybody get the same right? I mean, what's the difference? The same folks, you're making the same problem.
I don't understand. You're saying what's the difference in a 1 acre for sale or 1 acre for a family? Me personally, it's still 1 acre.
Right.
But
we're not asking the board to say yes now. We're asking the board to say if somebody comes in with a good plan and they can move maybe some of the development off of the direct flight powered and come back with a special use permit, that you have the power to approve something other than the cookie cutter ordinance.
Mr. Chairman, I personally don't have a problem with this approach.
I don't either.
I do have a problem with downzoning. So I have a real big problem with downzoning and taking people's rights. So I think that a workaround for you is that flexibility for staff to work with you and some kind of moving it around. I don't know how that would look tonight.
Well,
because Ben would have to say, this is how we could do it. But I do have a big problem with downzoning people's property, and I've expressed that many times before.
Of course, I'm an architect and I do some of this stuff for a living. So, and in fact, I worked for the county for several years ago. Some of you remember me.
Currituck plan.
Yes.
Mr. Woody, I mean, are you okay with that flexibility to allow the special use permit?
I think, in one respect, I still think that the flight paths aren't the most appropriate place for residential, but if we want to provide flexibility, then what I would suggest is we create a finding or something as part of the use permit that requires some sort of, and I have to come back to that to you probably next meeting or something, but some kind of finding that pushes them to design in a way that is less impacted by the flight path.
Okay.
There's places that do. There's other places that do that, so it's not unheard of.
Well, I know, like up in Virginia Beach, they make them use extra installations and thicker windows or whatever, just to minimize the impact of the sound.
There's a lot of things that can be done, even concrete roofs if it need to be for sound. I'll be glad to continue the dialogue and.
Sir, may I ask you a question?
Yes.
Are you looking for the flexibility for 1 acre lots or 3 acre lots? Or
I'm
both?
looking for flexibility in terms of trying to satisfy your requirements, but not necessarily following your cookie cutter rules. I don't know. My brother won't answer me as what he wants to do with the property. He said he'd like to do affordable housing, or either grow tomatoes.
One of those is possible.
I told him there's no problem growing tomatoes.
A or B, you like B.
But affordable housing would be very, very difficult. So if we can figure out a way to do that and satisfy the requirements, that's not downzoning in this particular case. Downzoning was on my property on the post office, which I think we've resolved. It's downzoned some by limiting the number of people.
But you're satisfied.
I think I can live with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I think that what might be appropriate is instead of piecemealing this, let Mr. Woody bring this back at our next meeting
I'll second that.
so that of course, we still got the public hearing going, but if we're going to make a change to this, he needs time to think it through instead of us on the fly saying this is what we're going to do. Then all of a sudden you come back and he says, guys, we messed up and we got to relook at it. So I'd rather him have the 2 weeks to address it than just, of course, if we can move forward with this and you still address it, that's okay too, but you need to let us know how you want to address it.
I'd rather bring it back to the next meeting and put some thought into it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Just a comment. The airport allowing new development in that flight area is just, we don't want to do that. And it's not something that is desirable for any airport to have houses built around it. Fentress has that problem right now, and that's why the Navy wants to come to Currituck.
So does Oceana, right?
Yeah, and so we need to not so much protect the airport, but what we have to do is look at the growth that's going to happen 15 years from now, and you really, if you build a subdivision in there with half-acre houses, and you got to PUD. I know we got one PUD approved. They've accepted it, being there. But it's going to cause people problems, and other people besides Mr. Snowden and Miss Snowden, they're going to be here complaining about planes taking off and everything over their houses, because that's exactly, where your all's property is going to be. And it's going to be a concern. And 15 years from now, I'm not going to be here to hear it, but somebody is.
I hadn't intended to tell you what my first phone call was.
What's that?
To your manager. I said, if you want to leave the ordinance as it is, I says, you need to buy the rest of my property. You bought all the property but this little teeny piece that has the post office on it. So I'm not sure what the criteria was for buying the rest of it. But I'm sitting here with a piece that's.
Well, you might put a store back there.
Had a store there.
I know. I remember it well.
So I think I understand what you're saying. I'm trying to make it work.
Exactly. I can appreciate it. Thank you.
Along with what Commissioner Martin is saying, I think something we need to look into, and I agree with Commissioner O'Neill, a person's property rights. But I know we're expanding the airport. We're looking to add hangars. And, for economic development, I see a lot more planes coming in and out of there. So along with the lines of what Commissioner Martin is saying, there's going to be a fine line of residential development. You're expanding the airport, making the runway longer, bringing in more hangars. We're looking for corporate jets. So I think, I really feel like Mr. Woody's really going to try to work with you, but when you think about the next 15 years or 20 years, like Commissioner Martin said, with the expansion of the airport, I know there's going to be a tightrope.
To take the property rights issue to the next level, the people who live next to that are impacted by the noise. But if you're going to deny them the use of their property, I think it's time to talk about purchasing the property.
I'm not saying deny your use. I'm just saying that's a consideration that has to be.
I understand the consideration, but the consideration to the ultimate is no building in the flight path.
Okay, Mr. Woody, you're going to bring something back forward at our next meeting, correct?
Chairman, call the question.
I'll make an effort to do that. Yes, sir.
As I understand what we're talking about, though, is we're trying to limit residential development, specifically medium to high-density residential development in the flight path of the airport. I don't constitute that as downzoning when there are other compatible uses, including office, business, that type of thing, because I think really the value probably would be more significant under those uses. What the FAA wants is they don't want a lot of people in the flight path all the time.
I understand all of that.
How many acres are we talking about?
Acres of this
Pardon
gentleman.
me for taking time.
You're right.
Mr. There is a Etheridge tract that's 178 acres. There's a Green tract that's 3, a Mosby tract that's 12, a Snowden tract that's 15,
I'm talking about
a
this
Taylor
particular-
tract that's 15, and a Balance tract that's 46.
So how many acres do you have, sir?
15.
15.
That's my brother's property.
Yeah, your brother's property.
Do I
That's
need to
right.
close the public hearing, or should I leave it open?
I would suggest that you make
Motion
a
was made
point
to
of
continue it.
continuing the public hearing until October 3rd at 7:00 p.m. or soon,
We're looking for a second.
or as soon thereafter as it may be reached.
Early on, but then we got more discussion. Okay, we have a motion to continue the public hearing. Mr. Woody, if you will bring something back to us on the next meeting, try to address what we're hearing. Appreciate it.
And it's possible that he may not be able to address it. I mean, we need to
We-
be
we-
upfront with that.
We all have to do our best.
Yeah.
That's all we can do.
Thank you, sir. Okay, motion and a second's been made. All in, Mr. Barton, discussion.
I was just saying aye.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay.
Before we start the next item, can we have a 5-minute?
You only got 30 seconds
30
left.
seconds
of
left.
meeting.
Only got 30 seconds.
Y'all quit bringing in those drinks. before
Item
the
number
meeting.
5, appointment to jury commission.
Mr. Chairman, nominate Ms. Vivian Simpson as the Board of Commissioners appointment.
I'll
I'll
second
second
that
that.
motion.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying
Aye.
aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Item number 6, appointments to Stormwater Advisory Board.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we reappoint Wade Morgan, Charlie Dozier, and Michael Cherry as they are eligible for another term.
I second that motion.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify
Aye.
by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Item 7, appointment to Whalehead Solid Waste Service District Advisory Board.
Mr. Chairman, I vote that we nominate and reappoint the members that are eligible for reappointment.
Second that. Have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Consent agenda.
Move for approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Ayes have it. Commissioners report. I think I'll start tonight. Again, I want to thank Mr. Martin, Mr. Etheridge, Mr. Bass, and Mr. Bishop for their efforts in taking time out of their busy schedules to go to D.C. to meet with our congressional delegation. It was a trip well worthwhile, and I thank you, and the citizens of Currituck should thank you as well. So with that being said, that's all I have. Mr. O'Neill.
We had a wonderful informational from Ms. Snowden tonight about the Rosenwald School, but I will tell, we still have a school down in Jarvisburg that's still in need of completion, and it needs to be furnished, and the county is not furnishing that, so people can get involved with that school as well and help get that one completed once and for all as well.
Yep.
That's it.
Mr. Rohr.
This past weekend, the Fabulous Fun Day down at the Rural Center was a great event. Any of you missed it, shame on you, because we had a good turnout. Rained all day, but it's a huge arena. If you haven't been down there, I know a lot of people went to the Cooperative Center thinking that was the Rural Center, but it's not. It's down county. And it was a great turnout. The sponsors, Town Bank, Currituck Barbecue, who else? There's another one.
Well, there was, Gravedigger.
Grave-
There was
yeah, Gravedigger.
Fire and EMS, the Coast Guard, the
ECB.
Yeah, Little Currituck Volunteer Fire Department. A lot of fun. Kids turned out, had a great time. But the culmination of the whole thing was Town Bank turned around and wrote a check to Currituck kids, which will benefit the children of this county. Money goes nowhere else, for $10,000.
Who did?
Town Bank.
Town Bank.
Town Bank sponsored this for us, put it on. Their crew was fabulous. They were great to work with. I did want to give a call out to Ace Hardware down there, too, because they put the whole notice up on their digital sign down there so everybody could see
Hurrah.
it going. But it was a fun time out there. And one other thing I'd like to say, we are continuing to look for folks to serve on advisory boards.
Yes.
I asked the my clerk the other day, what have we got? Who wants to serve on an advisory board? Well, we don't have anybody. If you want to help out, step up. Put an application. The application's on the website. Download it, fill it out, submit it to us. Everybody, I think, that's ever asked to be on one has gotten an appointment when the position came open. And we really need you to step up and help us out.
Thank you, Mr. Orr. Mr. Petrie.
I've been accused of being passionate about what I believe in, and I'm passionate about Currituck County. And for the residents of Currituck County, one of the reasons I moved here is we have a 32-cent tax rate. And the reason it's low is because of tourism. And we need to thank our lucky stars. I know we have traffic, and I know people are backed up, but we need, as residents of Currituck County, we need to thank our lucky stars because of our 32-cent tax rate, and it's because of tourism. So I'm very passionate about. I love it when I'm spending somebody else's money, and again, the committee, great job. You are in a no-win position, so I thank you personally.
Mrs. Gilbert.
A couple things. First of all, I was in attendance at Veterans Park on 9/11, and the Coinjack veterans, did an excellent program. The fire department, the EMS, the ROTC from the high school was in attendance. Superintendent Mrs. Scholler, the school superintendent, she did a presentation on where the students and the teachers were on 9/11, which was just an incredible program. So I want to just reiterate what an excellent program that I was in attendance with. On October 8th, for Old School, Bark in the Park will be happening at Maple Park in conjunction with what we are doing at the airport. Currituck Wings and Wheels. Jim Elliott, the manager, has brought in some items. The Young Eagles will be there. We have requested pilots to offer airplane rides, and I know with the events with the other air shows, this is not an air show. This is a Wings and Wheels, so we're going to have grounded things also. But there's historic aircraft that will be there. We've got presentations from the Boy Scouts. There's all kinds of items going on that day. So I encourage you to come out and support the Bark in the Park at Maple Park and also the airport. And I think that's all I have on activities going on.
Thank you.
I have to reiterate with John, Saturday was an exceptional day. For those of you that have not been to the rural park or the rural center, you need to get out there. I had a tremendous amount of people to tell me that, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how beautiful, how wonderful this site was, in addition with the rain just pouring on us. But being inside the arena was just an excellent venue, so I encourage you to get out there and look at that property and see what an asset we do have.
Thank you. Mr. Etheridge.
Well, Mrs. Gilbert just stole my thunder, but I attended the fun day, and I was very impressed about what Currituck Kids is trying to do. And I would urge each of you to look at Currituck Kids and help them in any way that you can. They're a very worthwhile organization, and they're geared solely to help those that can't help themselves, our children. But like Ms. Gilbert said, I had numerous people that came up to me and talked about the Rural Center. And overwhelmingly, they were all impressed with it. And I think what it does is it solidifies the vision that this county had when we purchased that piece of property several years ago and what it can grow into. As I told people, Saturday's event was just the tip of the iceberg of what can be done out there and will be done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Martin.
To reiterate, Mr. Scanlon, we need a sign for the Rural Center. People keep asking, where is it? It's on Spot Road in southern Currituck. So in order to find it, you've got to slow down and start looking for North Spot Road. We need a sign so people will know how to find a rural center. Next thing, I was in Washington for the Economic Summit. We did have, a a real good, enjoyable time, and it was very, very beneficial. It actually showed us that we are on the right track in economic development here. Listening to the CEOs of North Carolina, we had the AT&T of North Carolina speaking, General Electric Aviation, who have 4 factories in this state, spoke. We had Duplin Wines, who produce 365,000 cases of wine each year. We're in the wine business in this county. When you looked at the Wake Medical Group was there, they employ over 7,000 people. They were saying we need trained individuals. We need people going into the medical field. You also had Duke Power, a Southwest Electric Cooperative representative there. He said they're paying linemen $80,000 a year. They can't find them. We need technical training. We are building a regional aviation and technical training center. We are getting ready to meet the needs. Also, our guest speakers included not only the head of the Navy, but we had Senator Kay Hagan there. Congressman Butterfield spoke. We had the Secretary of HEW that spoke. Congressman McIntyre. And we spoke with our own senator, or our own Congressman Jones and his staff, and our Virginia representative, Randy Forbes. And he was elated to see us to stop by. This was a tremendous asset. We were able to meet people, and it felt good the way we were received there. And I just want the people to know that we spent long hours and walked about 6 miles around the Capitol complex there, shaking hands and greeting people and passing out cards.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
Martin.
sir.
Thank you. County Manager's Report, item 10.
Can I say something?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Peterson.
That's fine. I'm on my bandbox here tonight, along with Commissioner Gilbert and Commissioner O'Neill. The Rural Center is a real asset to Currituck County, and it was paid for with tourism dollars. That's it.
As were many of our parks and other recreation facilities were paid for with tourism dollars.
All the people in Pennsylvania, come on down.
And I got this nifty sheriff's badge down at the Rural Center the other day.
I'm a deputy. I'm a junior deputy also.
Mr. Scanlon.
Mr. Chairman, in response to Commissioner Martin's request, he's made that request before for the signage. We have applied for the tourism destination signage program for NCDOT to allow to get permission to be able to put a sign on 158. Pending response back to that, we'll be able to hopefully move forward, be able to put a sign out on 158. But we have applied for that. Wanted just some information on Hurricane Irene. Individuals or anybody who is still looking or needs assistance from the federal government, the FEMA is operating a recovery center at our cooperative extension facility. Their hours of operation are Monday through Saturday from 8 in the morning to 7 at night. On Sunday, they're operating from 1 to 6. Historically, these are open only for 60 days, but we're being told by FEMA that it looks like the amount of applications coming into Currituck is dropping off, so they're making a proposal now to only operate it for 30 days. So anybody that needs assistance needs to go ahead and no longer delay and go ahead and make sure they get out to see the folks at FEMA. We also asked patients, we were advertising and telling folks that had debris to move it to the DOT right-of-way. DOT does have crews out there picking it up. They were sort of a little slow in getting started, but they are out there now. They are moving through the county. They have started at the south end, and they're moving north, and I understand they're about in this area right now. They've contracted that out. They are picking up from state-maintained roads only. The county has made a request to the state for permission to have them also be able to go on non-state maintained roads, and that decision is still pending. We understand and know from all the phone calls, mosquitoes was one of the biggest issues post-event. We did start about a week and a half ago vehicular spray in the county, why we applied for approval to have aerial spraying. Aerial spraying was finally approved. They were supposed to fly Saturday, but the weather prevented them. They're actually going to be flying tonight. They felt like they had enough time tonight to fly the entire county, and the entire county should be flown tonight for mosquito spraying.
Tell John that's not the Navy.
Yeah, it
You may
won't
get
help
to
for
tell
people
him.
who watch this, but they will be flying at times. They will be flying a very low pattern. So if you have flown, it is the folks spraying.
Air Force.
Yeah, and while I'm on the topic, I know this is a little bit behind us now, but I certainly want to extend my appreciation and gratitude to all of the county departments that manned up our EOC and provided a response for Hurricane Irene, along with our volunteer fire departments, our forestry departments, our sheriff department, our school system. The list continues to go down of all the folks who pulled together as part of our public response, and they're all to be commended. We had a staff that came up here sometime Friday, and we actually lived in this building for a couple days to make sure that everything was addressed. And they'll just be commended. It's a great staff, a great group, and I think they did a tremendous job of responding and stuff, and I certainly want to give them recognition for that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
I came down on Saturday afternoon and observed firsthand what they were doing, and they are, Mr. Scanlon is exactly right. They are to be commended on what they did.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to echo that. I was down here on Sunday after the storm, and our county manager should be commended. I came into the follow-up, or I'm not sure what that meeting was that I walked in on, but I was welcomed, and the county staff, our county attorney, all of them, a tremendous job. So thank you.
Not here visiting, but I was on the phone enough with him that he probably figures I was here, or thought I was here. Okay, item 11. Need a motion to go in closed session according to GS 143, 318, 11, 6, and 3 to discuss personnel issue and to consult with our attorney on attorney-client privilege.
So move.
Second.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.